What's up, guys? This is DJArendee, and this video is basically I need to become more like an ESTJ. So me as an ESTP, I've always looked at ESTJs, and there was something I always hated about them. The thing I always hated about them was they would always say, you know, like in the military, I made a video of this once. My impression of the ESTJs in the military is good leaders act like me. And every time I hear that, I'm just like, this guy's a fucking retard. Like, this guy's a fucking idiot. And the reason I said that was because how can you say such a thing? How can you say such a thing? Like, how can you do that? Because I disagreed with who he was. I fundamentally, even the ESTJ was a military personality, okay, and he was the embodiment. He was living by the standards of what an ESTJ, of what a person in the military should be, okay. He was the embodiment of those standards. And so when he says you need to be, you know, good leaders act like me and do these things, what he's saying is I live by the standards of this institution. That's what he's really saying. And me as an ESTP, I have this TI, so I disagree that. So with me, I fundamentally disagree that I should be like you. Should I be like you in terms of this institution? Maybe. But fundamentally, I disagree. I would much rather be like, you know, the God of the Old Testament as a commander. As a naval officer, I would much rather model myself after the God of the Old Testament and fucking destroy everything and bring my wrath and my justice upon everybody. But anyway, so that's the thing so what I would tell people is you need to be more like the God of the Old Testament. But that's like the TI thing. Whereas right now, see, I strive to be, in my leadership, I actually strive to be like the God of the Old Testament. That is the rule that I live by. That's my standard. That's my role model that I live up to, is actually the God of the Old Testament and even Jesus. And you know, I've done a lot of research in looking for a good example of who understands the definition of right and wrong. And as I study the world, and I spent 3 years studying the world, and really that's why I became a Christian. And so now I'm sitting here and I'm like, okay, so I want to be like the God of the Old Testament, okay? So I see this ESTJ and says, you need to be like me. And I'm like, well, no, not at all. And I think he's a fucking retard. And the reason I think he's a fucking retard is because I'm not actually hearing what he's saying. What he's saying is you need to be more like what I represent, okay? Because that's the standard that I live by, and I expect you to follow those standards too. So now that I live by standards that I have found, that I've spent a lot of time thinking about. I've studied economics, I've studied politics, I've studied communism, capitalism, socialism, fascism, Nazism, thisism, thatism, etc., libertarianism, liberalism, conservatism, Kantianism, Epicurus, all those things. Studied all those things, and eventually, and really thought about it and what is important, what really matters. And now what I'm starting to realize is that as a TI user, I've been going around. See, I've always been looking for a role model. As an ESTP, the truth is I've always been searching for a role model. I've always been searching for something to aspire to. I see this guy who's a gymnast. I'm like, wow, I really like what you can do. Teach me. And then I would ask him questions, and then I would become a gymnast. And then here he is, and then I would get to his level, and then I would actually look to the next one and be like, okay, that person, I want him as a role model. And then I would excel to him, and then I'd become a stronger person and leave this person in the dust. And then that person would get upset that I left him and moved on up here. And then I look up here and say, okay, me as an ESTP, I was always growing. I was always getting stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger because I'm always finding role models. Until eventually I had no role models, and the only role model I could find was God himself, the God of the Old Testament, etc., and Jesus and those sorts of people. I looked at Buddha, I looked at, you know, Vishnu, I looked at Zeus, I looked at all these other people, and the only one who preached love and life and patience and life and abundance was God and Jesus. You know, this Allah guy advocates rape, and treat your women this way. And I'm like, you know what? I don't really want to treat my women that way, so I disagree with you. That's bad, and I'm sure they don't want to be treated that way either, so that's stupid. So I'm going to go, how about this book over here? Oh, Jesus. Okay, let's look at this guy. What does he stand for? And then I'm like, okay, well, this guy makes absolute fucking perfect sense, and he explains why I've had all these problems my whole life. So my whole life I've been aspiring towards a role model. And then I got depressed because I had no role model. The only role model I had was myself. And I was like, this is fucking bullshit. Where do I go now? So at first, my goal was up. Just become like the best person I can be. That was my goal. For 27 years, that was my goal, was to become the best person I could possibly be. The strongest, the most intelligent, the most capable, the most attractive, the most confident, the most this, the most that, all these other things. And then I'm sitting there, I'm like, you know what? And now what I'm starting to realize is, and I look at ESTJs who, they don't do that. They do, but they have to keep seeking. You see what I'm saying? If they want to become the embodiment, like a lot of them in the military, like that. I know a lot of, you have to keep, if you're an ESTJ, you've got to keep finding the next best thing, and you have to understand morality itself. And the thing with ESTJs is they tend to find an ideal and then stick with it for a very long time. They tend to stick with that ideal until it just gets worn out and tired, until it just becomes exhausted. So those of you who really know ESTJs, you'll know that they do something until it's completely exhausted and it's just not what it used to be anymore. And the only way to go is to find or improve upon that standard by seeking role models and stuff like that. Now, the ESTJs, they have this ability. You see, they're your typical alpha male. The ESTJs they're your typical alpha male, and they'll say things like, everybody needs to be like me. But me, I'm like, I hear that and I'm looking for a role model, and I'm like, okay, I totally disagree with you. I want to be like this guy over here. This guy is way cooler, way more intelligent, way more successful than you are. I don't want to be like you. So the ESTJs have this way of saying, this is how it is, this is the truth. And I've always hated that because I disagreed with what they were, because they were a product of the society around them. Now, I don't understand the full details of what it's like to be an ESTJ and how they grow and mature, but I do realize, I think that ESTJs probably need to become more like ESTPs, and the ESTPs need to become more like ESTJs, in that I have aspired to greatness. And now that I'm there, I think it's time, you know what? Fuck it. I have earned the right to start telling people how it is, and to start telling people what the standard they need to live by is. And if I tell you that something is fucking disgusting, it's fucking disgusting. Okay? If I tell you that this is stupid or you're a fucking retard, it's because you're acting like you're either a liar or you're being a fucking coward or you're a fucking retard. If I tell you you're acting like a coward, it's because you're acting like a coward. If anybody has earned this right, it's me. And I know that sound like people hear that and they're like, well, you know, whatever. No, this is the truth, is if anybody has earned this right, it's me. And only a humble person can say that. And I know that's weird to say. It's like me coming up and I'm like, I'm the most humble person I know, so you need to follow me. Well, I'm the embodiment of humility. Well, here's the definition of humility. Humility is knowing that you're not God of the universe, okay? And that's what humility is. So because I know this, because I'm a Christian and I actually follow his example, I'm actually way more humble than most of you guys are. And I know this. And that's why I know so much stuff. You come to my channel, you're going to learn the truth. And the reason you learn so much truth is because I'm humble, and you can only learn stuff if you're humble. So if you're not humble, you're going to pretend that you already know this stuff, and you're above this, and you don't need to know this stuff, and that, you know, you create knowledge. You're better than God. You create knowledge. You tell people what the truth is. Whereas with me, I'm actually taking a leap of faith here by acting more like an ESTJ. I'm actually taking a leap of faith here by telling people this is how it is. This is the truth. This is the way things should be. And I'm taking a leap of faith by asserting that I am that thing. It's a leap of faith. It's a leap of faith. And the more I assert it, the more people believe me. And I'm like, you know what? This is weird. It's like I've never... And cause it's like the biggest trick is me getting to believe me. So that's what I'm doing for now on. I'm doing it. I'm asserting, you know what? This is how it is. You got to live by my standards. If you think I'm unattractive, it's because you're a liar. It's that simple. I mean, maybe I'm a little angry, or maybe that anger might be a little unattractive, but at least I'm honest. Okay? Now, with other people, there's some people who project themselves and like, well, that's fucking, the way you're acting is just completely narcissistic and this and that. I'm like, well, if I was a narcissist, it would be false. But it's not. So anyway, that's sort of my view. I think the ESTJs, I think they probably, if they were to stand in their shoes, I think they kind of start off narcissistic. It's like they aren't what they claim. They actually aren't what they claim to be, and they think they're what they claim to be, but they actually aren't. So they actually eventually they'll learn that they need to actually physically become, or they actually need to be able to physically demonstrate what it is that they're doing. Whereas with me as an ESTP, I used to keep quiet. I used to be really quiet and say, if somebody wants to follow me, they'll follow me based on my example. And then I would just basically dominate. Like I was that quiet guy who would do a backflip in front of all the breakdancers. Then everybody would be like, oh shit, he did a backflip. And then people would start like looking up to me. Whereas the ESTJ is the guy that says, everybody will listen to me and you will embody me and do what I say, because I'm confident and I'm worth listening to. So that's kind of the difference. Is the ESTP would actually gain followers by actually embodying what it is they want to follow, but they're letting the people choose. Okay, they're letting the people choose. Whereas the ESTJs, they're embodying the confidence and the respectability and the self-respect and the dignity, and they say, this is what I am, and you will give me this respect. They demand respect, and people give it to them. But then when you get to know them, and then they'll probably start to feel a squeeze, which is where, if you're going to say these things, if you're going to talk the talk, you need to be able to walk the walk as well. So they start to feel the squeeze and start getting pressured toward actually getting stronger as a person, taking the advice from the ESTP. Whereas the ESTP has been doing this his whole life. He hasn't been gaining followers, and now he needs to step out and actually, it's like, this guy is a leader. He needs to actually speak up. The ESTPs are the leaders who need to speak up, and the ESTJs are the guys who need to shut up. I hate to put it that way. They need to actually speak less, because they already know how to portray themselves, but can they actually embody it and let the other people choose for themselves? So leadership as an ESTJ versus leadership as an ESTP, they can kind of learn a thing from one another. The ability to assert yourself and kind of be forceful and tell people this is how things should be. That's kind of where the ESTJ stands out, telling people what to think. Whereas if telling people what to think is wrong, it's bad. Whereas the ESTP doesn't actually know what everybody should be thinking. The ESTP doesn't know what everybody should be thinking. So they're always on a quest to figure out, what is truth and all that stuff. And so once they figure that out, then they're qualified to tell everybody how to think. And that's kind of where that's where I'm at. So I'm taking a leap of faith here, and I'm just going to start telling people how to think. That's all I got. See you later.